Hey guys, it's John. I'm back with another video, and we're going to continue on exploring this whole blueprint for deception. How these world fairs, these exhibitions might be part of a grander deception of how you pull off things on a mass scale, how you erase history, change history, do anything with the narrative that you would like to. And just to set the stage here, we'll get started. This location that we're going to talk about, it was the western corner of a place called Forest Park. So this was largely undeveloped land, forest, as well as marshland, right? So swampland. And 36 months of time from start to finish, they were able to transform this entire area to what you're seeing today, right? And we're going to go over this. There's only two places that are left from this fair, from this exposition. We're told that a lot of these places were temporary, but we'll just get into some of the information. Now, one of the things that I really enjoy, obviously, about any platform is the fact that there's comments, and some of the, sometimes you learn some amazing stuff just from comments that people leave. There was a user named Chronologist on YouTube as well as Twitter or X, and they asked the question about, could these be dioramas, these buildings, or could this be Photoshop manipulation? And, there was a link that was left. I don't remember if it was Chronologist or somebody else, but basically it was to this channel, and I'll leave it in the description, called Mind Unveiled. And the title of this video that you're seeing in the thumbnail is Old World Photoshop, Vanilla Skies, Early Photo Manipulation, and Compositing Unveiled. And it was a really eye-opening video on how, there was a very mature industry that existed, including college courses, for how people would be able to manipulate negatives, put multiple negatives together, and basically have an early form of Photoshop where you could remove things, add things, layer things on top. So it was just an interesting perspective to be able to learn while making this, that sometimes the things that you're told as historical evidence or as historical fact through a picture are in fact a manufactured image, right? And so I think it should just be pointed out. But thanks to Chronologist for bringing that up. And this is the large area, right? So on the map, it might not look that big, but this is 1,272 acres in Forest Park. We're told that in 36 months, 10,000 workers transformed the swamp and the forests into this fairground. There's 1,500 buildings, 75 miles of roadways and walkways. There's a 7-mile double electric track with 17 different stations. So the last video I did was on the 1893 Columbian Exposition. This is double the size, right? That was 640, 650 acres, so double the size. And, I guess they just figured, hey, it could take, we could say it took double the amount of time. It took 3 years, right? But the majority of these buildings that are here are made out of something called staff, a mix of plaster and fiber. So just keep that in mind as we look at these things, because you have to keep in mind these are all supposedly temporary structures. And just some of the items that are here, you can see on the left the U.S. government building next to the liberal arts building, and it's this grand basin. There are what look like 3 fountains that pour into this basin. And the one thing I wanted to call out here is the Fine Arts Palace, which sits right behind Festival Hall and the Grand Basin. This is the only building that still remains. This is now the museum, the St. Louis Art Museum. So this still exists. The water and the basin, right, that still exists. But these 3 different fountains that pump water into here, they were all destroyed, right? And I think it's also kind of impressive that they were able to make all of these things, even though, we're told it's temporary, right? It's still, I think, a ridiculous story and we're just gonna keep going through it here. Oh, one last thing before we move on: the agriculture building to the right of it is the Philippine exhibit, and we're told as a way to commemorate their purchase of the Philippines, they built and constructed this whole little area that's 47 acres in size. So nothing about this project is small. Everything is super, super big. And there's so much stuff that we wouldn't really have time to cover it all. But we're gonna go through, and we're just gonna start looking at stuff from the left, starting at that U.S. government building. So this building here, this we're told is modeled after the Roman Pantheon. And inside of this building, as with a lot of these buildings, these were actually just exhibit halls, right? So they're called palaces, but they're basically going over different exhibits. And on the inside of this one, you had a working post office, you had various Smithsonian artifacts, you had exhibits on natural resources, agriculture, and military history. For a temporary building, this spans over 20 acres. And I'm not sure what material these stairs are being made out of, but much of it looks very permanent to me, if if I can just be candid here. This is another view of that same government building. You can see that double dome over here, or this dome with a ring around it. The sunken gardens, across from the government building. Just a beautiful, exquisite area, right? Archways. I don't know if all of the statues necessarily were there. Those might have been things that could have just been added on. So it's always like maybe there's a half truth here, where we're telling you half of the truth, that we used this this Paris of plaster to be able to make some of the some of the deities and things that are on top of the buildings, but maybe not necessarily the entire thing, because that just seems ridiculous. This, moving right along, this is the Palace of Mines and Metallurgy. So inside of this building, you would be able to see, models of mines or exhibits of the raw materials, stones, marble, limestone, or just, the regular finished products in a location. But again, this building is 22 acres in size. Massive, massive building. Next, just another view of this same, right, that same sunken gardens on the outside here, but the Palace of Liberal Arts, another building, pretty large, 9 acres in size. And this one would showcase how science and technology would be able to transform those natural resources into manufactured products. So there would be like a Chinese collection, British coins, German printing, just a bunch of different displays. I also think it's interesting. This almost looks like a bundle of Roman fasci on these columns here. They could be not even there and inserted. Same thing with these people. Very interesting video that I mentioned in the beginning. Definitely check it out. Palace of Education and Social Economy. Again, just looking at the size of this building. Look at this sheer number of columns that are there. Look at the archways that are. It's just unbelievable. But this, inside they would have very interesting exhibits here. Kindergarten all the way up to university courses, right? So, you could go in there and they would basically have full on, exhibits of people going to classes and how these would be run. Not the largest building, it's only 8 acres, but again, huge building, beautiful building. Education and Manufacturing building, Grecian architecture. Again, you could also, observe people attending classes, inside of something like this, but beautiful bridges, concrete walkways, look like very permanent walkways to me. Large Grecian columns. And, just this is on the inside as you're looking at, those columns themselves before you get to the interior of the building, and just look at the artwork and the, look how ornate the ceiling is. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. Temporary. This here is the electricity and machinery building. So this building housed the power plant for the entire Exposition, supposedly built by GE, and it also featured exhibits on tools, machinery, steam pumps, and generators. Inside, there was also exhibits on electric locomotives, trolley cars. It seems as if they were really trying to play up the impact of what electricity was going to have on the future. And they also featured some medical displays like the x-ray machine. So, again, furthering what was going to happen, what they were going to be able to do in, in the medical field. But one of the things that I find interesting is like the bottom of this statue here. It looks very much like concrete. And then this fish on top that's being ridden by this, half person, half mermaid thing. It looks like that could be plaster just added on top. So seems like a very real building in the background, real steps, real concrete bulkheads to be able to, not have anything be damaged by anything that's traveling in the water. And this is the same building at nighttime, same angle, just absolutely gorgeous. Size and scale, unbelievable. This is the Varied Industries Palace, covering 14 acres. This had, it was basically for the artistic appeal. This would, they would have things like art pottery, cut glass, furniture, jewelry, Japanese and German exhibitions showcasing, their various decorative arts. Just another phenomenally large building. I mean, just look at the windows. Look at it's just, it really boggles the mind that they would be able to make something that quickly. And again, it doesn't really scream to me that these are temporary roads that people are walking on either. I mean, all of it looks phenomenal. This is like a full-blown, 2-story, I mean, just magnificent. This building is the Palace of Machinery, covering 12 acres. This had the latest in all tools, machinery, steam pumps, generators. This is where generation was happening again for the entire fair here. And, just some future looking stuff. AT&T, they had a display here where they, showed long distance calling, right? Like this was going to be one of the big, things to come in the future. And obviously it wound up being that. This is just the inside of this building. And one thing that I found interesting is when I was looking up pictures for this, you can see pictures of these buildings being constructed where they're showing wooden frame. But then in a lot of these buildings, you can clearly see that this is a steel frame, which has to be supported by some serious footers to be able to handle the weight that's above it, right? So even in trying to research the history and how this was made and how this was constructed, the pictures and images that you wind up seeing of the steel used on the inside leads one to believe that maybe that's just not true. It's clearly not true from some of these images, right? This is the Palace of Transportation. Beautiful entranceway in the front with these 3 double archways, 2 pillars on either side or columns that go up. Just a beautiful building, 16 acres in total. The central feature was a revolving steam engine. for the 100th anniversary of the steam locomotive. But inside of here, there was basically 100 years of transportation with a horse-drawn carriage, wagons, cable cars, rail cars, buggies, and then about 160 automobiles, right? Some part of me thinks that it might have been easier for you to transport all the items that you needed for this to an existing location rather than you actually build this as a temporary structure. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. And again, a lot of these walkways, like this walkway that you see here, looks very much like it's concrete to me. I don't know how it would just be floating there in the water. This building is one of the only buildings that are here. In fact, this is the only building still left. The only other thing that's left here is the cage, which is now part of the bird the bird portion of the zoo. So there was this building, which is still there. This is the Fine Arts building, or the Palace of Fine Arts. It is now the St. Louis Art Museum. But this was one of the only buildings that was constructed as a permanent building. But it looks very similar to all the other buildings that we've been looking at. But this is that same building. You can see it is very, very permanent. With St. Louis there on his horse. But yeah, it's very clear this is a real building. Those are real concrete steps. There was nothing that was made about that. And the hard thing to really wrap your mind around is how it looks so much like all the other buildings that are around it. This is another view looking up at this thing, and you can clearly see all the stuff here that's in the waterfront. This is all permanent. None of this is temporary. So you would just have to ask yourself, with all of this permanent stuff that's there now, was it really all temporary? And only this one thing did they build as permanent. I mean, that's a lot of undertaking to then just also tear it down in such a short period of time. This here is the Palace of Agriculture. This is actually the largest building on the fairground. It spans 23 acres. It had showcases of agricultural products from 15 different countries and 42 different states. It housed a working dairy farm, a cider mill, an olive oil factory. And you can also see on the ground here a floral clock. So there was a clock, a physical mechanism that would turn, and it would give the correct time to the outer face of the actual clock was done in flowers, right? Absolutely beautiful, gorgeous building, temporary structure. And then this is, going towards that Grand Basin and looking at the Grand Basin. My bias from that video that I saw, it makes me think that these people aren't even in these boats here. But really, just unbelievable looking at this. And you can see over to the right, that's one of the secondary, fountains to flow in. So this is the one that's in the center there. You can see a little bit closer. So you have water that's flowing out from the top, coming down into the Grand Basin. Just absolutely gorgeous. This is all, we're told, temporary buildings, temporary structures. Hard to believe. Extremely hard to believe. Just a note, 45,000 gallons per minute would flow into this Grand Basin from the 3 fountains, this being the main one in the middle. And just so you can get your mind around what we were just looking at, this is the big thing in the middle where it says Festival Hall. I know the Pike is being highlighted, but when you look at the Grand Basin, that's where we just were. And that was the waterfall area that we were looking at. The thing down here where it says the Pike, this is a mile long of various buildings that they would give you an idea that you were in a different country. And part of me in my thinking in making this video now, it seems almost as if you would have enough time to be able to bring items to fill these buildings. And maybe you could even construct something out of wood in the bottom here, the way that they're telling us the whole thing is done. But I just don't think that there would ever be enough time for you to be able to pull that off. Realistically, it doesn't seem to me to make a lot of sense. And there is one other thing that I've noticed and that I've thought about a lot while I was making this. There's a lot of buildings that there's a lot of pictures that you can find of quote unquote construction, and I'm doing air quotes right now. But one thing that you never seem to find is the large chow halls or the large dining areas. The large areas where people would be living to be able to do this. Supposedly there were 10,000 people every day working on this, and nowhere do you see these large living quarters for where these people are, right? There's lots of stuff about this finished and afterwards, and scaffolding around a building. You could just use scaffolding to be power washing something or cleaning an outside. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily in the process of construction, right? So just something to keep in mind, something to think about there. Little tidbit there. And again, some other views of this area, the mile long pike. And again, this was, an entrance to one of these locations. This was called the Creation. And there is some sort of contrasting difference between some of the sculptures that are there and some of the things that seem like it's very obvious that they have been added on. But I see like a mixture of a permanent building with things added on, almost looking like they're just out of place, right? Like the top of this building where it says the Creation just kind of looks a little out of place to me there. It doesn't look like the scale of the rest of the buildings that you're looking at. And there was one last thing that I wanted to go over before we close here. There was another comment that a user on another video of mine left. I think their name was Give It to God, and it said, something to the effect that these cities seem like they're fit for saints. And I thought about that for a little bit, and the story that we're given is that these were ideas that people were going to be able to use to show how cities could be made in the future, right? Most of our cities do not feature things like this. So something tells me that there's something a little off with this story. And what if it was maybe half true, half lie, and maybe in the past, somebody did create this city and it was used as a place to showcase what could be done in other places. I'm open to a lot of ideas now, just because the original idea that you would create such large things, such large edifices, and then tear it all down after such a short period of time seems extremely wasteful. And I believe this is the first one that actually, we're told, turned a profit. So it seems like they were doing this for a while, unable to turn a profit until this one, right? So I guess to wrap this up here, this is the second one that I've reviewed here of the World's Fairs, but I think it can just serve, as I was saying, a blueprint for deception, right? I think sometimes if you condition people enough to be able to view something that has a ridiculous story, and you realize that no one's questioning this story, it kind of helps you set up what an even bigger one can look like into the future. And so maybe these world fairs functioned as a place where you could kind of create a narrative. And if there was something that did not fit the narrative for the future, well, you could just say that it was temporary in nature. You created something that looks better than any building that we can build today, that takes a much longer period of time. And this is kind of a way that you can get people conditioned to hearing ridiculous things and not questioning it. So, I appreciate you for tuning in, for watching. I appreciate all your comments. If you can like and subscribe, it would really help me out and helping the channel grow. And I appreciate everybody out there who's searching for the truth. I think sometimes you want to know the truth and you get started on a path and you kind of want to share with others the things that you've learned about how you maybe have been lied to in the past. And I thank all of you for coming along on the journey, because clearly you would like to find out more truth in the world too. So God bless.